Everybody. All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. We may have some folks coming in as we get started. That's fine. I'll just keep rolling. So good morning. Thanks for tuning in to learn about FactoryTalk AssetCentre, which is Rockwell Automation's asset management solution. My name is Troy Menino. I'm the process automation specialist at Turtle & Hughes. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask. We should also have some time at the end for questions and additional discussion. So this is what the agenda looks like for the webinar today. First, we'll talk about why our customers even need an asset management solution. I'll tell you about some of the core capabilities of FactoryTalk AssetCentre. We can hit some of the highlights of version 9, which is the latest release of AssetCentre, and then we can have some time for additional discussion, and I'll walk you through some of the resources that are out there. So why do our customers need an asset management solution? And it's pretty simple. Our customers have lots of automation assets on their plant floor, locally and at remote sites. And these are devices like controllers, HMIs, drives, managed switches, each of which has one or multiple configuration files or programs associated with it. So organizing and managing all of that content alone can be daunting and even risky. Some common challenges and risks include lost configurations and device failure. If one of your PLCs fails, do you know precisely right now where to find the code? What about managed switch configuration files? Maybe you have multiple versions of documents that you have to manage. As your production environment changes, as almost all do over time, how are you managing and documenting that change? Do you know who's making code changes or why even? Unauthorized and undocumented access is a concern at any manufacturing site. So having the ability to restrict access to certain aspects of your process is essential to production and safety. One primary goal of AssetCentre is to reduce downtime due to any of those challenges. Why? Because your downtime is very expensive, and it's not just downtime. AssetCentre helps prevent idled employees, damaged equipment, and helps eliminate certain safety concerns. So now let's talk about AssetCentre. These are the core capabilities of AssetCentre, broken into 4 categories. First, the archive and disaster recovery piece. And the AssetCentre archive enables you to centrally manage versions of programs, files, folders, and it also gives you source control, meaning people must check in and check out documents for editing, which ensures there's always a single version of the truth. AssetCentre can also back up the files living on your automation assets. For example, AssetCentre could back up or retrieve the code from one of your PLCs. It could then optionally compare that ACD file containing the code to the master ACD file within the archive and produce a detailed differences report, which could then be automatically emailed out if you want. And that disaster recovery functionality is also available for third-party devices. The auditing capabilities of AssetCentre allow you to track detailed user actions in real time. So if a code change was made, you know who was logged in, where, when, and exactly what code changes were made, simply by reviewing the audit log. AssetCentre allows you to create searches, which are useful predefined reports associating users, assets, and programs. So these can be scheduled or on demand. Perhaps you would like a report each time a production run finishes, or if there are any I/O forces left on at the end of a shift. Again, those reports can be distributed automatically via email if you want. The auditing capabilities of AssetCentre are also useful for customers who must comply with 21 CFR Part 11. Another core feature of AssetCentre is security. So AssetCentre gives you total control of your automation system. You determine who is allowed to view or edit any documents. And then finally, AssetCentre does support third-party devices. More on that later. There is also an AssetCentre web client that allows you to track your assets from a mobile device. Licensing is modular for AssetCentre, so you only pay for what you need, either capability or capacity. The first three add-ons shown here are additional capabilities. The last add-on is simply additional assets, and I'll go through some of those capabilities in a few minutes. I should also note that there is now an AssetCentre System Starter, which is a bundled version including the AssetCentre server, the inventory agent, disaster recovery, and an additional 100 assets. So this system starter is the most cost-effective way to get started with the capabilities that most AssetCentre customers desire. AssetCentre is scalable. It can be part of a standalone system or a network distributed architecture. So on the right are 5 critical components to any AssetCentre deployment. The AssetCentre server governs the system's operations. The client is where configuration is done and where you can view system operations and reports like the audit logs. The AssetCentre agent is a piece of software that carries out disaster recovery and search operations on behalf of the AssetCentre server. So the more assets you have, potentially the more agents you will have, but all systems start with one. The FactoryTalk directory and FactoryTalk security are common among the entire FactoryTalk suite of products. And then finally, a SQL server is used to store the data from AssetCentre. So getting a bit more granular now, the AssetCentre archive that enables the version and source control is available for any electronic file, including PDFs, Studio 5000 files, Microsoft Office files, AutoCAD, just to name a few. It's not limited to Rockwell. It's any electronic file. As I mentioned, the disaster recovery add-on feature will retrieve the file from your device. Perhaps it is PLC code, okay? And that code could then be compared to the master version in the archive. If differences are detected between those two versions, you determine what happens. You could create a new archive version if you wish. You may also produce a differences report, which you could email out. Important to remember is that this disaster recovery feature refers to 2 separate operations, the backup and compare. Backup is AssetCentre retrieving the file from your device, and then compare is when AssetCentre compares the file it retrieved to the master file in the archive. And this disaster recovery feature is available for a variety of Allen Bradley products, Windows files, and third-party assets. AssetCentre is constantly monitoring changes in your automation control system, so you can be alerted in real time when certain changes are being made, either through the AssetCentre client or through an automatically generated report. An important piece of AssetCentre here, you can create scheduled or ad hoc searches to generate reports against assets that you're interested in. So you could run these searches based on a specified time period if you want, maybe weekly, daily, or hourly, or just however you require it. And you set the conditions for any search. So examples of searches could be maybe searching for any program modification by shift, by line, or by a combination of those. Maybe you're searching the archive history to determine what files any user has modified during the last month. Or you could be searching audit logs at the end of every shift for any I/O forces or other unsafe practices. Here's an example of an audit log, which tracks user actions. So for example, if a user makes a code change, you can see what time it occurred, where, in other words, what file, who was logged in, and any comments that were left. So selecting any line of the audit log will open a more detailed display below. And similarly to the audit log, there is an event log, which tracks AssetCentre system events. For example, when disaster recovery schedules run, that would show up in the event log. AssetCentre also allows you to secure your control system by restricting access to certain users. So you can choose what artifacts any user may view or edit. Maybe you only want your maintenance employees to be able to open and edit a Studio 5000 file. Another new add-on here, the Asset Inventory Agent is an add-on feature which maintains a version inventory of devices running in a plant. So what does that really mean? Well, the inventory agent scans for Rockwell Automation SIP devices, network switches, Windows-based PCs, workstations, and then you can automatically add the new assets into the asset tree, which is particularly useful the first time you're setting up your system when you're building your asset tree within the AssetCentre client. All Allen Bradley devices pretty much have a lifecycle state, either active, active mature, end of life, or discontinued. And so AssetCentre is able to sync with the Rockwell Product Compatibility and Download Center, or PCDC, to show you the lifecycle state of your assets. If assets are discontinued, AssetCentre will tell you the recommended migration path. Again, there is an AssetCentre web client where you can view and run your pre-configured searches and disaster recovery schedules, as well as view the audit and event logs. There is now a custom device plugin enabling disaster recovery for additional third-party assets. More on that shortly. AssetCentre version 9 is the latest release, and here's a summary of some of the key features. Following this slide, a few of these features are broken out and highlighted. So I'll run through a few of the highlights. Those of you using FactoryTalk View SE, our network distributed HMI software, will experience Premier integration with AssetCentre. So now you can natively back up FactoryTalk View SE projects within AssetCentre. Additionally, within the Trend Pro tool in FactoryTalk View SE, you can show operator actions from AssetCentre alongside production data and FactoryTalk alarms. So this helps add context during troubleshooting situations. Your Stratix fully managed switches are now natively supported assets within AssetCentre as well. There are multiple configuration files that live within these switches. As mentioned, the release of AssetCentre version 9 also provides greater support for third-party assets. So the custom device plugin enables the disaster recovery operations for a variety of third-party devices. So using a scripting tool called Audits, which essentially simulates your keystrokes, execution of the backup and compare features can be accomplished via your third-party development software. Version 9 also added lifecycle states for your I/O modules. Although small, the green squares next to devices indicate that products are active. Here, you can see next to the PLC5 processor, there is a red square indicating a discontinued state. If you were to hover your mouse over that red square, a pop-up recommending migration to a 1756 L7X controller would come up. There are now increased design recommendations supporting larger systems. So in other words, no matter how many assets you have, there is an architecture that will work for you, even using remote sites. And we can work with you to help determine what that architecture looks like. This is really just a reference slide for the supporting operating systems for critical components of an asset center deployment. If you want a copy of this presentation, I'll send it to you so that you've got this. Okay, moving pretty quick. There are some additional resources, including the Asset Center webpage. The navigation path is shown here. There are web-based labs through the Rockwell Automation cloud-based infrastructure that I can schedule for customers to get hands-on with the software while following a lab manual. Asset Center is also heavily documented, given that it is a core component of the integrated architecture. And that documentation can be found on the Rockwell Automation literature library. So for more information, or if you would like a copy of this presentation or to schedule a demo or lab, please email me at troy.menino@turtle.com. And with that, I will say thanks and open it up for questions. I see we've got a few customers on the line. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. This webinar was recorded, so if you want a recording of it, you can also email me and I'll get that to you. I'm happy to do personalized demos and schedule labs for you so that you can get hands-on with it. You've got my contact information now. I'll stay on the line for a little while if anybody's got questions. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks, Troy.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you.